The guy who supposedly wasn't around for 21 Savage is sitting in London right now with receipts that could flip everything we thought we knew. Bank statements, phone records, 7 years of documentation. Kevin Emmons just stepped out of the shadows with a story that's got everyone questioning what really went down. Let me paint you a picture real quick. You know how 21 Savage built his whole image around being this street legend from Atlanta who came up with no father figure? The kid who said his dad was dead to the world? Well, Kevin Emmons just pulled up with evidence that he says proves he was sending money, making calls, and trying to stay connected while his son was telling the world a completely different story. The timing on this is crazy too. Right when 21's at the peak of his career, collaborating with Drake, winning Grammys, his biological father decides now's the time to speak up. And the stuff he's saying, it's not just, oh, I was around sometimes. This man's coming with specific dates, specific amounts, specific conversations that allegedly happened behind closed doors. But to really understand how deep this goes, we gotta start from the beginning. See, most people don't even know 21 Savage was born in London. Shaya bin Abraham Joseph came into this world in 1992 in Plaistow, East London. His father, Kevin Emmons, was this kid from Brixton, South London, who grew up in what he calls a tight Caribbean household with 5 older siblings keeping him in check. Kevin wasn't some random dude either. He was deep in the UK hip-hop scene back in the 80s and 90s. Breakdancing on BBC programs, doing graffiti, DJing at local spots. He says music and culture were literally his entire life. His family kept him away from the streets because, according to him, his father was the type of man you didn't want to disappoint. That fear of bringing problems home kept him focused on positive outlets. The way Kevin tells it, he met 21's mother at a party in East London when he was out with his brothers. She approached him, they connected, and before he knew it, she was pregnant. But this is where the story takes its first wild turn. Kevin says she hit him with an ultimatum that nobody talks about. She wanted him to cut off his entire family, his parents, his siblings, everyone, and move to America with her. Now check this out. Kevin claims she was part of something called the Nubian movement, which he describes as this strict cultural belief system that basically said anyone outside their specific group was the enemy. She started giving him pamphlets trying to convert him to these ideas that painted certain people as devils and others as chosen. Kevin says he couldn't rock with that because he'd seen good and bad from all types of people throughout his life. When he refused to abandon his family and join this movement, that was it for their relationship. But Kevin insists he never abandoned his son. According to him, for the first 7 years of 21's life, he was picking him up every single Friday after work, bringing him to family gatherings, keeping him for holidays. Christmas, Easter, summer breaks. Kevin says young Shea was always around his paternal grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. He tells this story about walking with his son when the kid was maybe 5 or 6, and out of nowhere, young Shea asked him something so deep about relationships and trust that Kevin was shocked. He says his son was brilliant, always observing, always thinking deeper than kids his age usually do. Then everything changed when 21's mother decided to move to America. Kevin says she remarried and wanted that fresh start, but he fought it. He claims he went to court, tried to block the move, but the system wasn't trying to hear a young black father's concerns about his son leaving the country. The court basically said as long as she allowed visits, she could take him wherever. And this is where Kevin's version gets really specific. He says that even after they moved to Atlanta, when 21 was 7, he kept sending money. Western Union transfers, bank deposits, whatever it took. He's got papers showing transactions from 2000 to 2007, regular payments that he says were for his son's support. Phone bills showing international calls to Atlanta numbers. All this evidence that he claims proves he was trying. Kevin describes calling the house in Atlanta and getting blocked by 21's mother. He'd call, she'd hang up, he'd try again, she'd tell him to stop calling. Eventually, the number changed. Then the address changed. He says he even flew to Atlanta once, showed up at what he thought was their address, but they'd already moved again. The last time Kevin says he actually heard his son's voice was when 21 was about 12. They had a brief phone conversation that Kevin says ended with his son saying he didn't want to talk anymore. After that, silence. Complete radio silence for years while Kevin watched from London as his son's life in Atlanta got more dangerous. Here's something that hits different when you hear it from Kevin's perspective. When 21's best friend got killed in that shootout in 2013, when 21 himself got shot 6 times in 2013, Kevin says he was in London watching it unfold through social media and news reports, unable to reach out, unable to help. He describes feeling helpless, knowing his son was in the hospital fighting for his life, while thinking his father didn't care. Then came 21's rise to fame. Kevin says he first realized his son was becoming a rapper when someone showed him a video online. There was his boy, now calling himself 21 Savage, rapping about street life in Atlanta. But what really hurt Kevin wasn't the music, it was the interviews. Hearing his son tell podcasters and journalists that his father was dead, or might as well be dead, or was never around. The crack allegations especially got to him. In multiple interviews, 21 suggested his father had substance abuse problems. Kevin's response to that is straightforward. He says he's never touched crack in his life, never even been around it. He questions why someone with his background, his family structure, his involvement in positive community programs would suddenly become an addict just because his son says so. Kevin points out something that actually makes you think. He says when 21 got detained by ICE in 2019 and his UK citizenship became public knowledge, that should have been the moment people questioned the narrative. If 21 was born in the UK and spent his first 7 years there, how absent could his father really have been? The timeline doesn't add up if you believe Kevin was never around. During the ICE situation, Kevin says he wanted to help. He was ready to provide documents, testimony, whatever his son needed to fight the case. But he claims 21's team never reached out, never responded to his attempts to contact them. Instead, he watched celebrities like Jay-Z and Cardi B rallying around his son while he sat in London with information that could have helped. What's really getting people talking is Kevin's take on why 21 might have created this narrative. He doesn't think it was just about rap credibility or street image. Kevin believes 21's mother influenced how his son saw him, feeding him stories about abandonment that weren't true. He talks about parental alienation, about how one parent can poison a child against the other parent through consistent negative messaging. Kevin also questions the stepdad situation. He points out that 21 rarely mentions his stepfather, who allegedly raised him in Atlanta. If this man was really the father figure, why doesn't he get credit? Why does 21 talk about having no male guidance when supposedly there was a stepfather in the house the whole time? Kevin thinks there's more to that story that hasn't been told. The financial aspect is where Kevin really goes in with the receipts. He claims that not only did he send money for 7 years, but he also had life insurance policies with 21 as the beneficiary. He says he kept paying these policies even after losing contact, just in case something happened to him, his son would get something. These aren't the actions of a deadbeat dad. Recently, Kevin did an interview where he broke down crying, talking about missing his son's entire adult life. He says he doesn't want money, doesn't want fame, doesn't even want an apology. He just wants a phone call. One conversation to understand what went wrong and maybe start fixing things. But here's what's got the internet really debating. Some people are saying Kevin's just trying to cash in now that 21's successful. They're pointing out that he waited until his son was rich and famous to come forward with all this evidence. Why not speak up earlier? Why not fight harder when 21 was a teenager? Kevin's response to that criticism is that he did try, but nobody was listening to a regular guy from London claiming to be 21 Savage's father. It wasn't until 21 became huge that media outlets started caring about his story. Plus, he says he was hoping his son would reach out on his own once he got older and could make his own decisions. Others are questioning why 21 would lie about something so serious. Creating a false narrative about a dead or absent father is a heavy thing to do if the man was actually sending money and trying to stay connected. But then again, if you're 7 years old and your mom tells you your dad doesn't care, you're probably going to believe her. The cultural element adds another layer. Kevin being from the UK hip-hop scene in the 80s and 90s means he understands the culture his son later became part of. He talks about watching UK rappers like Giggs and Skepta collaborate with 21 and wondering if they knew about his son's London roots before it became public. Some of 21's lyrics hit different when you hear Kevin's side. Lines about not trusting anybody, about family letting you down, about having to figure things out alone. If Kevin's telling the truth, those feelings might come from being told your father abandoned you when he was actually fighting to stay connected. There's also the question of 21 siblings. Kevin mentions having other children who grew up knowing about their brother in America. They've apparently followed 21's career, seen his success, but never had the chance to build a relationship with him. That's a whole other layer of family drama that nobody really talks about. The timing of Kevin coming forward might not be random either. 21's been moving different lately, more mature in his music, talking about growth and change. He's a father himself now. Maybe Kevin thinks this is the moment his son might be ready to hear another perspective on their history. Kevin addressed the criticism directly in his interview. He said people can believe whatever they want, but he's got the documentation. He's willing to take a DNA test, though that's not really necessary since nobody disputes he's the biological father. He's willing to take a lie detector test about his claims. He just wants the truth out there. What makes this situation so complex is that both versions could have truth in them. 21 might genuinely remember feeling abandoned, especially if that's the narrative he was given as a child. Kevin might genuinely have tried to stay connected but failed to break through the barriers put up by others. Trauma and memory are complicated, especially when you're dealing with childhood experiences. The streets are watching how 21 responds to all this. So far, he hasn't directly addressed Kevin's recent interviews and evidence. His team hasn't put out any statements. It's like everyone's waiting to see if he's gonna acknowledge his father's version or keep it moving like nothing happened. Meanwhile, Kevin says he'll keep speaking his truth regardless. He's not backing down from his story, and he's not apologizing for waiting this long to go public with the receipts. He says every father deserves the chance to tell his side, especially when his name's been dragged for years. The wildest part might be that this could have all been avoided with one conversation. If Kevin's telling the truth about wanting to reconnect, and if 21 ever had doubts about the story he was told growing up, they could have hashed this out privately. Instead, it's playing out in public with everyone picking sides. Kevin makes an interesting point about rap culture and father narratives. He says the absent black father stereotype gets pushed so hard that sometimes cats feel like they need that story for credibility. But what if your father was actually there? What if he actually cared? Do you tell the truth and risk looking soft, or do you go with the narrative that fits the image? This whole situation is forcing people to think about family stories differently. How many of us are walking around believing things about our parents that might not be entirely accurate? How many fathers are out there with their own receipts, their own versions of why things went wrong? The conversation is bigger than just 21 and Kevin. It's about parental alienation in the Black community. It's about how immigration and relocation can shatter families. It's about how the stories we tell ourselves as children can become our reality, even if they're not entirely true. Kevin says he's putting everything on the table. The receipts, the timeline, the evidence. He's basically saying, check the facts and make your own decision. He's not trying to destroy his son's career or embarrass him. He just wants the narrative corrected and maybe, possibly, a chance to reconnect. Industry people are staying quiet on this one. Nobody wants to get in between a father and son, especially when both sides have valid points. But privately, you know everyone's discussing it, wondering what they would do in 21's position or Kevin's position. The question now is whether this changes anything for 21 Savage's legacy. Does knowing his father might have been trying to stay involved change how we hear his music? Does it matter if some of his origin story might have been shaped by childhood misunderstandings rather than facts? For Kevin, the ball's in 21's court now. He's said his piece, shown his evidence, cried his tears in public. He's sitting in London waiting to see if his son will pick up the phone or continue living like he doesn't exist. That's a heavy weight to carry, knowing your son's phone number, but not knowing if he'll ever answer. The culture's watching to see how this plays out. Will 21 address it in his music? Will he do an interview explaining his side? Will he reach out privately and handle it away from the public eye? Or will he let the silence speak for itself? At the end of the day, this is about a father and son who lost each other when the son was 12 years old. Whatever happened between them, however the story got twisted, that's a lot of years to lose. Kevin's 21 was brilliant and curious. the world's 21 Savage is successful and talented, maybe there's still time for them to know each other as the men they've become. So here's the real question. If you found out today that a story you've believed about your family your whole life might not be true, would you want to know the other side? Or would you stick with the version that helped make you who you are?